This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. First and Last by Hilaire Belloc. Chapter 28, On the Sources of Rivers. There are certain customs in man, the permanence of which gives infinite pleasure. When the mood of the schools is against them, these customs lie in wait beneath the floors of society, but they never die. And when a decay in pedantry or despotism or in any other evil and inhuman influence permits them to reappear, they reappear. One of these customs is the religious attachment of man to isolated high places, peaks, and single striking hills. On these he must build shrines, and though he is a little furtive about it nowadays, yet the instinct is there, strong as ever. I have not often come to the top of a high hill with another man, but I have seen him put a few stones together when he got there. Or, if he had not the moral courage to so satisfy his soul, he would never fail on such an occasion to say something ritual and quasi-religious, even if it were only about the view. And another instinct of the same sort is the worship of the source of rivers. The iconoclast, and the people whose pride it is that their senses are dead, will see in a river nothing more than so much moisture gathered in a narrow place and falling as the mystery of gravitation inclines it. Their mood is the mood of that gentleman who despaired and wrote, "A cloud's a lot of vapour, the sky's a lot of air, and the sea's a lot of water that happens to be there." You cannot get further down than that. When you have got as far down as that, all is over. Luckily, God still keeps His mysteries going for you, and you can't get rid, even in that mood, of the certitude that you yourself exist, and that things outside of you are outside of you. But when you get into that modern mood, you do lose the personality of everything else, and you forget the sanctity of riverheads. You have lost a great deal when you have forgotten that, and it behooves you to recover what you have lost as quickly as possible, which is to be done in this way. Visit the source of some famous stream and think about it. There was a Scotchman once who discovered the sources of the Nile to the lasting advantage of mankind and the permanent glory of his native land. He thought the source of the Nile looked rather like the sources of the Till or the Tweed or some such river of Thule. He has been ridiculed for saying this, but he was mystically very right. The source of the greatest of rivers, since it was sacred to him, reminded him of the sacred things of his home. When I consider the sources of rivers which I have seen, there is not one, I think, which I do not remember to have had about it an influence of awe. Not only because one could, in imaginings, see the kingdoms of the cities which it was to visit, and the way in which it would bind them all together in one province and one story, but also simply because it was an origin. The sources of the Rhone are famous. The Rhone comes out of a glacier through a sort of ice cave, and if it were not for an enormous hotel quite 4 square, it would be as lonely a place as there is in Europe, and as remarkable a beginning for a great river as could anywhere be found. Nor, when you come to think of it, does any European river have such varied fortunes as the Rhone. It feeds such different religions and looks on such diverse landscapes. It makes Geneva, it makes Avignon. It changes in colour and in its nature of going as it goes. It sees new products appearing continually on its journey, until it comes to olives, and it flows past the beginning of human cities when it reflects the huddle of old Arles. The sources of the Garonne are well known. The Garonne rises by itself in a valley from which there is no issue, like the fabled valleys shut in by hills on every side. If it were anything but the Garonne, it would not be able to escape. It would lie imprisoned there forever. Being the Garonne, it tunnels a way for itself right under the high Pyrenees and comes out again on the French side. There are some that doubt this, but then there are people who would doubt anything. The sources of the river Arun are not so famous as these two last, and it is a good thing, for they are to be found in one of the loneliest places within an hour of London that any man can imagine, and if you were put down there upon a windy day you would think yourself upon the moors. There is nothing whatsoever near you at the beginnings of the little sacred stream. Thames had a source once which was very famous. The water came out plainly at a fountain under a bleak wood just west of the Fosse Way, under which it ran by a culvert at least as old as the Romans. But when, about 100 years ago, people began to improve the world in those parts, they put up a pumping station and they pumped Thames dry, since which time its gods have deserted the river. The sources of the Ribble are in a lonely place up in a corner of the hills, where everything has strange shapes, and where the rocks make one think of trolls. The great frozen Whernside stands up above it, in Ingleborough Hill, which is like no other hill in England, but like the flat-topped mesas which you have in America, or, as those who have visited it tell me, like the flat hills of South Africa, and a little way off, on the other side, is Pen y Ghent, or words to that effect. The little river Ribble rises under such enormous guardianship. It rises quite clean and single in the shape of a little spring upon the hillside, and too few people know it. The other river that flows east while the Ribble flows west is the river Aire. It rises in a curious way, for it imitates the Garonne, and finding itself blocked by limestone, burrows underneath at a place called Malham Tarn, after which it has no more trouble. The river Svern, the river Wye, and a third unimportant river, or at least important only for its beauty, and who would insist on that, rise all close together on the skirts of the Plinlimmon, and the smallest of them has the most wonderful rising, for it falls through the gorge of Lygnan, which looks like, and perhaps is, the deepest cleft in this island, or at any rate the most unexpected. And a fourth source on the mountain, a tarn below its summit, is the source of Rheidol, which has a short but adventurous life like Achilles. There is one source in Europe that is properly dealt with, and where the religion due to the sources of rivers has free play, and this is the source of the Seine. It comes out upon the northern side of the hills which the French call the Hills of Gold, in a country of pasturage and forest, very high up above the world and thinly peopled. The river Seine appears there in a sort of miraculous manner, pouring out of a grotto, and over this grotto the Parisians have built a votive statue, and there is yet another of the 100,000 things that nobody knows. The end of chapter 28.